Okay, this meeting is being conducted via remote participation pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state emergency, signed into law on June 16, 2021. This meeting will be live streamed, but will have no option for public attendance or participation. To view or listen, go to Northborough Remote Meetings on YouTube or to a link. Do I need to read the link out loud? There's a link, https://town-northborough-mass-us.zoom.us, and I presume that there's links there to find this meeting. So I'm going to take the roll call. I'm Sandy Scott. We have Joan David Forrest. Do you want to just say hello?
Hello.
Jennifer O'Connor.
Jennifer.
Here. Sorry. Hi.
Hi. Sherry Clark.
Here.
Casey Rickley.
Hi.
Joan Clementi.
Hello.
And Kristen Wickstead, who's our select person liaison.
Yes, here. Hello.
Oh, and Doreen, I missed you.
Yes, I'm here.
And we have John Codere, town administrator, with us tonight.
Present.
Okay. Can someone make a motion to call the meeting to order?
I'll make a motion. Joan.
And would someone second?
Second.
Thank you. That was Casey. Okay, Joan, you want to?
Did you say John
Yeah,
or
so
Joan?
Joan, sorry. Joan, yeah. Joan, I usually let you take over.
Joan or John? I did not hear that either.
Joan David Forrest.
Oh,
Okay.
Joan.
Yeah. So
Too many J's.
Too many.
the date of our next meeting is Thursday, March 17th at 7 p.m. and it will still be virtual. And there were no minutes to review in January. However, I think I still need to get you either October or November's. So we'll vote on those next time.
Okay.
And I want to take this opportunity to introduce John Codere, the town administrator. And I'm pleased he was able to come. So members get a chance to talk to him and ask him questions. And I know one of the things members were looking for was information about ARPA funds and how that may contribute to human services. And members wanted to talk about the staffing levels. And I think those were the main things.
CARES funds as well.
Oh, yeah.
Are we also going to hear from June an update like on the number of referrals and the number of cases and all that? I feel like we usually get that.
Yeah. So what I've been working on is the end of the year report, and I haven't added those all up, so I should have it for the next meeting. But basically, I can tell you that Interface has taken 47 cases over the past year and a half, counseling cases, so that has helped a lot. I'll get you the numbers in terms of the jump in case management cases and referral information, and also all of our partnership programs. I will mention that John had approved $7,000 for one of my initiatives, the Northborough Southborough Substance Abuse Program, and we're able to start the process with Amanda Decker, who is going to be our strategic planning person to solidify our goals and where we're going. And the other initiative is the Mass Call 3, which is another substance abuse program. and the town of Hudson received $125,000 for 8 years they're going to get. So that's a pretty significant grant. And they also, they've taken the lead on this since 2012. So it'll involve 8 other communities. A total of 8 communities will be
Including
involved.
ours, correct?
Yes, yes. Yep. Is there other, I'm sorry, I don't have those statistics yet, but is there other information, Jen, that you were wondering about?
I don't know
And
if this,
you're-
like, if this is not appropriate for this meeting, just cut me off, but like, because I've worked with the schools, like I've been working with Southborough Youth and Family on the Mass 3 call or whatever it's called. So I'm
Mhm.
just wondering, like, will you reach out to me in the same way to,
Oh, are you talking about the interviews they're setting up?
yeah,
Okay, so Shannon is the full-time coordinator over there, and she
Okay.
talked to me after I met with Mass 3, the coordinator. She talked to me about us doing some joint interviewing because we have a lot of people in common.
okay.
So next, we have John Padere here, who's here. I think I mentioned to talk to the Youth Commission members and meet a lot of them. He hasn't met. So Sandy, I didn't know if you wanted to start off with some of the information Youth Commission members were looking for, such as the ARPA funds and CARES Act.
Well, I know that we had talked about staffing and about where funding might come from. I think probably there were some folks that had specific questions. I think there's been certainly a lot of discussion as we've, as a commission over the years, listened to the concerns about providing services, whether or not we have enough staff to provide the services that I think there's been an observation that there's been open position for a long time that hasn't been filled. I'm not sure I'm capturing other folks' concerns. There may be, Joan, maybe you want to chime in as you have a little more longevity that you might want to, you have something you want to add? Oh, you're muted, Joan.
Sorry about that. It was to speak with John a little bit about how we can move our part-time requisition to a full-time requisition, seeing that other towns have less populace and more employees in family and youth services. To talk a little bit about the government COVID funds, how much have we received, how much went to health services, filtered through June, if any at all. I guess if we use everything that we could use in the CARES Act and the ARPA Act, as well as many times right within the open meeting here, we have questions that we believe could really only be answered by the town administrator. So how do we filter those questions to you? Seeing that it's an open meeting and the answers should really come back to an open platform. I think that's what I have. Yeah.
Well, I'm just gonna start off by saying, Joan, I checked twice because I thought there was a typo on the list of a membership that you've been serving since 1993. I said, that can't be possible. There's somebody that's been around longer than me on one of these boards or committees. So that's
Yes.
impressive. The longevity is very impressive, and the history there is good because we can
Thank you.
talk a little bit about that history.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a difficult history.
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to thank the Youth Commission for having me here today. You know, I kind of have a standing policy that I repeat endlessly, and that is I will meet with anybody, anytime, anywhere to talk about anything about Northborough. And so it's been a little bit more difficult as of late with COVID. I wish we were meeting in person. There's no substitute for that, but this is a close second. So I appreciate you having me in, and I'm happy to meet with you and talk to you about the town's finances, ARPA, staffing, anything that you guys would want to talk about. I'm happy to do that tonight. So I don't know where you want to start. Why don't we begin with CARES funding?
Okay,
So CARES is funding that has already lapsed. CARES is very different from the American Rescue Plan Act, which we can talk about in a moment. But the CARES Act was really limited to direct response for COVID. It was very heavily restricted by the federal government and the state. So that money didn't come directly to us. It was money that went to the state, and they then allocated based on population funding to Northborough. I got to tell you, it was the most frustrating money that I've ever received, because it was so strictly constrained, and it didn't seem like we could do much with that money that we would like to do with it. The bulk of it went to the school department to do testing. Some went to the direct response for COVID with equipment and testing kits and so forth. The one request that we did get, June had brought forward the interface referral service, and we spent quite a bit of time trying to get the administration of finance at the state level to approve that, and ultimately they said it would not qualify. So we worked with the Benevolent Trust Committee, got that released, and it was a great service. I know you're going to talk about it a little bit later tonight, but that was ultimately put into the operating budget. But the CARES Act was really very limited in terms of how those funding could be used. I think the analogy I said at one of the board meetings was, it's like dying of thirst as you crawl through the desert and there's a big cold glass of water there, but you just couldn't drink it. So so that money has lapsed. And again, it was extremely rigid in terms of direct response. And we were struggling with finding direct response. Now, on a positive note, in terms of outreach and health and human services throughout the pandemic, one of the things that we did find is we were in regular communication through June with the food pantry, community meals, interfaith clergy group, and we were constantly checking about food security, housing security, and just making sure that we had a good finger on the pulse of the needs of the community. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but we had a COVID task force group that consisted, June was on there, as well as the senior center director, police, fire, finance, myself, and we met on a weekly basis, and we discussed everything from the pandemic response. And a big piece of the meeting was always set aside to talk about community needs. Was there anything coming up or surfacing that needed to be addressed? And one of the positive things about our community is, we don't have a census tract population. We have needs like every community, but we don't have whole neighborhoods, large populations. We do have a segment, as every community does, and people that are otherwise in great shape, but through the human condition, for whatever reason, need assistance. And so the nice thing about a town like Northborough is that we do have the capacity to respond to that. And as a community, I think we did a very good job of that. But as far as the CARES Act is concerned, the only request was for the interface referral service to deal with the mental health counseling needs. And as I said, we pushed that all the way up and through administration of finance, and they would not allow that to be funded. So
Could that have been used for, housing insecurity, as kind of like as a, preventative?
Yeah,
Because
so,
I think we have 8 homeless people, homeless families, and, one homeless person is too much.
no, agreed. Unlike, again, other communities that had significant housing security issues and the homeless population, at any given time in Northborough, we have a handful of families that unfortunately are going through some difficult time. We didn't see a spike during COVID regarding that. We did not see significant increases, but we also know that the state put in a number of programs for housing security, and they put a moratorium on evictions and so forth. But again, our community, and we had these conversations on a weekly basis, we just didn't see the spikes. And I know a couple communities looked at putting in programs like that, and what they found was, for a handful of folks, the administrative costs of trying to put something like that together would far outstrip the benefits that you're giving. And again, with the state putting millions of dollars towards housing security issues, the process that was identified was best to work and help shepherd people through those state agencies and those state processes. So it wasn't something that made sense to create an entire program around. As you can imagine, the administrative component of dealing with trying to look at people's financial backgrounds and qualifications and things of that nature just didn't, the level of need just didn't rise there, that through the existing programs, we're able to work and through June's office to work with folks. But very few communities that we see, larger cities, folks with a lot of need, they put larger programs in place. We just, again, on a weekly basis, having these conversations, that need just didn't rise to that level.
Did we use everything that was allotted to us through the state?
We used most of it. Many communities wound up turning back because, again, it depended on, if you didn't have the communities that had a lot of need, particularly the cities, were able to use up these funds. Most of our money, most of it went to, as I said, testing programs to make sure that the schools were able to stay operational. That's where the bulk of the money went to. We did buy some equipment with it to sanitize vehicles and things of that nature, but it was so limited, even in terms of capital. They wouldn't allow you to do significant capital projects. We used it to buy plexiglass and PPE, protective gear, and things of that nature. That's where the money went to. So I know we're still going through the reporting in terms of the final closeout. The other thing that the state did, and the money was available through December of 2021, and the state arbitrarily announced that they were going to make that the money expire 6 months prior to that. And so it caught a lot of communities off guard because we were all looking for that extended duration. So, but they wound up extending it a little bit.
That's good. And how much was that, John?
How much was what?
How much did the town receive from the CARES Act?
The full amount from the CARES Act was about 1.3.
And in that 1.3, we couldn't have gotten our homeless people off the street?
Well, again, in order to do that, you would need to create a program. At any given time, we have a handful of families that are going to need assistance. The state had put millions of dollars into housing security programs, and there was a lot of resources and money that was made available. So the decision was made to be working through June's office to help refer people and get them through those existing programs. I'm not aware of too many communities with our demographics that created a program. It just, again, the administrative end of it, you'd wind up hiring you'd wind up having to do a third party contract, and again, it would consume many times the funding that we would ever be giving out. So, I mean, again, one of the things that we were lucky with, we checked in, like I said, with the food pantry on a weekly basis, community with meals on a weekly basis. At the end, the community was very generous. At the end of COVID, the food pantry actually made a donation back to the senior center. And and the food pantry, I'm sorry, the community meals, my wife is one of the coordinators of community meals. So I used to work the event when it was more in person and for years past. But even then, they've got the funding to meet the needs that were presented. So, but the CARES Act, it was so frustrating. The other thing too is you had to show that anything that you were responding to, you had to draw that it was directly related to COVID. And as I said, at any given time, we have a handful of people that are going through a tough time, and we want to help them out, but we couldn't point that it was due to COVID.
Yeah.
And so that was very frustrating for us to be so constrained by that funding source. But that was the program that was put in place, and everybody, the folks that used up all of the money typically were the larger cities that had significant populations in need. Again, we just we're lucky that we don't have it, and that the community was able to meet the needs. Believe me, we asked that question every day. In fact, we had the senior center went so far as to call every single senior in town 3 times to check to see if they had food, medicine, if they needed anything at all. And I think the seniors, and by the way, out of close to 3,500 phone calls, they identified 2 people that maybe could have used some help, and we sort of looped them in. But by and large, again, just like we would expect, although we have a large senior population, they're fairly well off. That's not to say there aren't needs, and the folks that are in need, they're already on our radar. We're already in contact with them. We're already providing Meals on Wheels, and so we already had known those folks, and we're able to reach out to them. So there was a lot of public outreach and conversations around needs. And again,
I'm a senior and I did not receive a call, just an FYI.
they called every senior 3 times. So
I'm a senior
okay.
and received no call.
Okay.
I don't like admitting I'm a senior, but I am.
So we had a bank. We had a bank of folks that just made calls. They started off calling all seniors, and by the end, I think they were limiting to the oldest cohort of seniors. But the initial round contacted every senior. I think I don't want to call anybody out here, but there were members on the Board of Selectmen who received phone calls as seniors, and again, it was it was nice because it was a constant check, and on a weekly basis we asked those questions, and it was a constant check to make sure that we weren't seeing any housing insecurity that was any different than what we would see in a typical year. And the difference is, though, the state pumped millions of dollars into these programs, and so shepherding people into the resources that were already available made the most sense for us. So
Okay, thank you.
yeah, you're welcome. So do you guys want to talk about, well, why don't we talk about staffing, and then we'll come back to ARPA.
Okay, sounds good.
So
everybody else. Okay.
yeah, again, we'll go wherever you guys want to go. One thing I just want to be very clear to convey: the open position isn't being held open by us. We're not trying to save money. We are trying to fill that position, and we have found, as a municipal organization, like many organizations right now, if you read the paper, staffing and hiring is the #1 issue all around. I know school departments had a ton of difficulty finding substitutes, and counselors right now are in high demand, and it's very difficult to find a counselor. Our senior center director position is also open. I have an interim director there that has been with us for over 6 months now, because we have been unable to find a senior center director, and it's not for a lack of trying. It's frustrating, but again, our senior center director typically is somebody with a social work background, and our previous director, once removed, was a licensed social worker, and so there's just not a lot of folks out there at the moment. And I met with the Diversity Inclusion Committee a few months back, And they had made rounds talking to all the department heads. And the biggest issue that we're facing is just the ability to attract people at the moment. And there are some jobs that are even more difficult than others. And what I hate to admit this, since this is being recorded, but other towns are poaching, larger towns are poaching my staff, and then I'm poaching staff from smaller towns. And that's very unfortunate. I'm part of a group in the MMA where we are trying to generate interest in getting people to move into the municipal job market. And for a variety of reasons, people are choosing just not to. One of the big constraining factors that we found as we dug into this a little bit more is positions that are normally forward facing, like myself. You expect to get knocked around on social media or in the public, and it comes with the territory. I know what I'm getting into. But what we're finding is department heads and even staff line positions, people are getting beat up, and it's taken its toll. And there are a lot of folks that just don't want to do that kind of work anymore, frankly. Positions that weren't forward facing and never meant to be, became that. I'm through the chair. Jen has her hand up. I don't want to.
Can I ask a question? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Through the chair.
know stuff isn't this simple, but if you have like several open positions and we can't hire, and presumably it's because maybe the salary is lower than people are looking for, like, is there a way to like combine positions or use the money that you haven't had to pay out to like, hire one really great skilled person at a higher salary? Like, is that something, if maybe there's somebody who'd be interested in, filling multiple roles. Like, I know one person can't do 3 jobs, but maybe there's some, joint thing that could be filled. Is that something that's?
Yeah, and we've, what we've done quite a bit of is we've worked through a lot of regional collaboratives. We have a regional veterans agent. Most recently, we formed a health initiative with multiple communities in the area to share staff and to attract staff. Again, this is health agent and nursing staff, which is very difficult to recruit at the moment. So yeah, we tend to look at all those options. But just come back to my initial point, and that is that it's not as though the position's vacant, it hasn't gotten the attention. We're just, there are some positions that are very difficult to recruit for. And right now, there is a severe shortage of mental health providers. And so it's very difficult to recruit. So
this is a part-time position that we're trying to hire for. That
yes,
has no benefits.
yes.
Would we have more luck if it was a full-time position with benefits? Now, I recognize I'm trying to hire for my company as well, and it's a completely different area, but I recognize that there's a shortage of workers in all fields and all across, and I'm sure that mental health is one of the harder things to fill. But it seems like we're limiting ourselves by making this a 32-hour position where we should maybe consider a full-time position with benefits. I think there's what we perceive is there's a need.
Yeah.
So we can talk about that need, but let me just kind of talk about the part-time position. So one of the things that we did working with the school administration, many years ago, is all of our positions that are in the school department as well as the town are 19-hour or 40-hour, or either 19-hour a week, not benefit eligible, or full-time. And that's where you're getting your value. If you have a position that's 25 hours a week and pulling $20,000 worth of benefits, that is not the most cost-effective approach. But in terms of staffing, it's very difficult. It's difficult to hire, to bring on full-time staff with benefits. It's a very expensive thing to do, and it has a significant ripple effect, as I'm sure you well know, through the balance of the costs. We do have a lot of positions. We have positions that were actually cut during the pandemic. We reduced a full-time position in the DPW that needs to be replaced. And we have standing needs for positions that have been unfilled, like a deputy fire chief position. There are a number of other requests. So we have requests every year. I get requests pretty much from every department about additional staff, and so we have to go through the priority needs. But the other thing that we do is, we try to look at alternatives, service delivery models. And so, one of the things that we have brought on board, and I know it's on your agenda for later today, and I mentioned it earlier, was the interface referral service. We are trying to find the best impact for our funding. And so, again, you hire a full-time counselor who can take on a relatively small caseload and may or may not be properly trained or suited for those particular cases, or for $15,000, we outsource it to Interface. And, they had 47 folks that they were able to manage and refer. And that is a very good use of our time and our resources. So one of the things, and June and I have had this conversation, is, we should not be, for the limited staff that we have, we should not be in the counseling business except for emergency intervention, crisis management, and referral, or taking people on till we can get them through the system and refer it off to a counselor. The vast majority of people in town, they have insurance, and then, Mass Health, Medicaid, those are all accepted by the counselors that we work with. So that was something that I felt was a very good solution. And one of the things that was troubling to me is that over time, our mission and our focus sort of gravitated towards counseling, and that was not the original intent. I know that's where the need was, but now we have a service delivery model that is much more cost effective in meeting those needs. We're not going to be able to hire counselors to meet the counseling needs in our community. What we need is an intervention and a referral focus. And if you would just indulge me for a moment, because Joan's probably the only one around here that remembers going back. But I was here, and we hear people talking about, well, it used to be a full-time, assistant director position. So when you go back before June came on board, because June was the first director that was hired by me after we went through the process that we went through with the Family Services Department. But back then, the assistant director provided a lot of the services in the school department. The director at the time oversaw NEDP, the after-school program, and unfortunately, we had some issues. I was the one that personally looked into the operations of the department, the workloads, and how time was being spent, and it was not being spent in an effective and cost-effective or efficient manner. And ultimately, there was at the time, this is going back probably about 15 years ago, there was a lot of discussions about, do we need to have a family services department, and should we get rid of the family use department? Police chief, myself, folks on the committee at the time, working with the financial boards and committees, we wanted to maintain the service. And it was scaled back to the director and admin. And then down the road, we added a part-time counselor so that we had coverage, because coverage was really the bigger issue more than anything else. And that's where we have been. I think it's important to keep in mind, I know everybody wants to look at the one little town next door to us that is smaller than us that has more staff. But I'm in the process of doing a classification compensation study at the moment, where I'm looking at all the positions for pay and job descriptions. So we have 19 comparable communities that we're surveying. Of those 19 communities, only 6 of them have a family services department. And of those 6, only 3 of them have more than a director. So I worked in the town of Chelmsford, 36,000. There was no family services department. Now, I have been very supportive of the department. June has gone around and done presentations at the National Municipal Association about the value of family youth services department. As a manager, I want to be able to have somebody to refer someone to in need who knows how to help them and how to get them the services that they need. That's very different than being the agency that provides the actual services. That's not our role. We're not going to get there, folks. And that was never the intent. It's about dealing with and helping people in their moment of need, shepherding them through the system and getting them to the resources that they need, be it fuel assistance, food stamps, food insecurity, and mental health. And the biggest issue and the biggest thing that I've seen over the last couple of years is we really started getting into direct counseling. And that arguably has consumed a great deal of June's time and a great deal of the part-time person's. And that has been the biggest constraining factor. And that's why we look for, okay, so if that's the issue, what's the best, most cost-effective way to address that? And Interface, hands down, is terrific. You are never going to be able to provide counseling to all those folks. And that has freed up, 2/3 or 3/4 of June's time. It also freed up and would free up, if we can hire a part-time position, would free up a great deal of that person's time to do some case management, but more and equally as important, what we see in like the Board of Health is to leverage the people that we have to deal with the emergencies, shepherd people through in the time of need, be a liaison to the community groups, so to make sure that we as town officials know what's going on. And that's what we did every single week for the last 2 years. Every single week, we checked pulse in the tab on all that. And so, as we kind of come through the pandemic, we're continuing to monitor those things. But what we're seeing now is the leverage of having the department. And by the way, I don't know how many of you know, like the staffing that we have. Most of our departments are 2-people departments. It's department head and an admin. That's what we have. That's the depth to our bench. And so what we do is we try to leverage our people for contract administration and grants. So perfect example, Board of Health. No department has been more impacted, including Family Services, than the Board of Health. Hands down. It's been absolutely amazing, the amount of work for the Board of Health. I only have one Board of Health director, and they have an admin, and that's it. There's no permanent part-time person. And so working with the neighbors, collaborating, working through grant opportunities, we have been able to get staff and to leverage the staff that we have to be actually the leader in our region for public health, for all vaccination clinics, everything. We are the lead agency for all those grants. So there's a lot of money that is around and will be coming through the state that we want to be able to leverage ourselves. So June mentioned at the beginning the funding to work with the consultant at the high school with the town of Southborough. $14,000. The town share is $7,000. Now we have somebody who has the expertise in the background to come in and do an assessment, and that assessment and the work that'll be done through that small investment of $7,000 will ultimately be used and lead to potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars of grant funding. That's the model for a little town like Northborough. That's the model that we're using. And that's the model that we're trying to get behind. We did get into trouble. We did have a span, no question about it, where we just got bogged down in counseling. And the state, had some issues at the time in terms of taking on folks, but, Interface, and I know Interface has been inundated as well. So I know that they're experiencing a significant workload. But the thing to keep in mind there is Interface is now adding staff to their organization to make sure that they can move people through and get them to the counselors. The number of counselors are the number of counselors. We're not going to do anything about that in the short term. But in terms of Interface not being able to handle references or referrals, they're addressing that with staffing. We will address it then, because I'm sure my assessment from them is going to be more than $15,000 next year. But again, in terms of efficiency and return on your investment, those are the types of things that we're looking at. Interface, grant funding, and again, the 1 person or 1.5 person office, we need to be more about coordinating and leveraging that and getting out of direct counseling. And June and I have had multiple conversations about that. I think her caseload is down to around 7 right now. So I would like to see it down to no more than a transient couple of folks who come to her in need, and she needs to help them for a short term and transition them out. That's the model. That's the model that we went to. That's the model that June was hired for, because I'm the one that had this conversation when we brought her on board. And that's kind of where we are now. I think as we look forward, I think there's going to be additional grant opportunities. And frankly, collaboration is going to be the way to do it. Like working with Southborough on this grant, $7,000. That's going to get you way more than a part-time counselor. Last point, I know their hands up, and I'm going to stay as long as you want me to, and I will answer any questions that you want. I just want to make one final point, and that is a part-time counselor. This is a $70,000 a year position for a full-time counselor. We get a great return on investment for a half-time person because we get coverage, somebody for June to bounce things off of. It makes perfect sense to me, right? When you add that other half-time, and then you add benefits, now you're at $90,000. Okay. So if I take that delta and you think of what you get for $15,000 for interface, $7,000 for this grant funding, with Southborough, in my opinion, as a manager, those are the things, the areas that we should be focused on in investing in. And I need to make sure, I have a responsibility to make sure that June's time is freed up so that she can do that. I can't ask her to do counseling and to do grant administration and collaboration and all that other stuff. So we have a solution, and we have transitioned to that in recognition of the need for counseling. And so we're actually in a very good spot. We just happen to be at a moment in the market where it's difficult to hire counselors, full-time or part-time. But in terms of in terms of return on your investment, I'm not convinced that is the way to go. More investment into making sure that we have the resources to help people. But I think there are ways to leverage that investment to get greater return. And we've done that in every other department, and every department. You don't think the Board of Health would love another full-time person, or pretty much every department that's a staff of one? We're Northborough. And like I said, 19 communities are comparable communities. There's only 6 that even have a family service department, and only 3 of those have more than a director. So again, our one neighbor that's smaller than us has more resources. And this is the problem in this anecdotal stuff. People focus on that. The reality is, I think that we have a very, very strong commitment, and I'm very much committed, and I have been from the beginning, to making sure that these services are maintained. We just need to look at the best service delivery model to have the largest impact for the resources that we have. So, all right, now there's lots of hands up. Sherry.
I was going to say, so if Joan has been here forever, I have been here a very short amount of time. But I think I was probably one of the people that brought up how shocked I was at the size of the working body for Northborough Youth and Family Services, only because my career has come up through sociology and psychology. And I did internships in college for town youth and family services. And I'm just curious if anything has ever been looked at about the added benefit to having additional full-time person that could also work on grant money, that could also hire college interns that could take on some of that caseload. And we're not paying out for that because you're trading it for college credit and things like that. I feel like we live in an area where those able bodies that are dying to go to work would be available, and it would have that added benefit. And then when you have those people work for you, if the job is decent, they want to stick around because now they're ingrained in that community as well. Also, I think my other point of view is just coming from a parental point of view and somebody who does a lot of town organizational programs through my full-time job. And I've utilized Shrewsbury Family Youth and Services a number of times. And it seems like there's a real added benefit to a town being able to offer some of that programming that has nothing to do with counseling, but has to do with really servicing the teens in our area and getting to the heart of a lot of the issues that they're going through right now. The difference that I'm seeing for my 10-year-old and my 20-something-year-old, and the things that I've seen in each 5 age gap between my kids and my high schooler, I just feel like it's a whole different world now. And if we don't if we don't get ahead of the game, we're going to be behind the ball in terms of servicing the kids that I feel like Northborough's well known for having good schools and having good community and really trying to take care of those kids, and being able to add some of that added resources for our kids that go beyond counseling and go more into just added services seems like a real benefit to the community for me.
Yeah, and that's it. I appreciate those comments, and I'm gonna come back to that one in particular, but I want to go through some of the comments that you made so that I answer the questions. You
Yeah.
mentioned interns. We have a long history in June. That's one of the things June's done a great job with. We've routinely run interns through, and it's a great way to leverage resources. Again, leveraging June to get, a couple of interns. At one point, we would have 2 or 3 interns in here, and they would be able to run, a support group. And a big piece of it, though, honestly, was, giving, the interns or giving these students an opportunity to get exposure, because they need that in order to advance in their career. So a lot of towns will do that, and that's something that historically we've done. Again, unfortunately, we started, June's time was getting crowded out with counseling, and that became more difficult. Interns are great, but they require a lot of supervision, especially if they're here and they're here working for credit. There's a lot of work that goes with that, but it is a symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship. But you've got to have the capacity of somebody with the licensure and the training to be able to appropriately supervise them. And we have that in June, and she has done, I think, done a great job with that. The second point is you raised Shrewsbury. Shrewsbury does not have a family youth services department. They outsource it. In fact, June used to work for them, and she came here, and again, this going back, 14 or 15 years, because part of the issue was, this constant need to fundraise as a nonprofit and not just be able to serve as a family youth services department. So, there are a lot of different models. I mean, we could outsource family youth services like Shrewsbury does if the services are felt to be better. But I'll tell you this, they do not contribute nearly what we do in terms of resources to that. And I do think there is significant value in having somebody on our internal team that can build relationships and work with the community groups and the schools on a consistent basis. But there are a lot of different models out there. We can look at outsourcing family youth services, but I wouldn't be a proponent of that necessarily.
John, could I, and I don't mean to interrupt, I'm just curious because having worked servicing families, I'm just thinking about the task that it would be to handle interns on top of your own caseload. And that's why I was advocating for another full-time person, because when I ever found out it was June on her own, I nearly had a heart attack just coming from those organizations. I know how much work it is just servicing families, never mind trying to handle administrative pieces and maybe, help with the intern. But I feel like if you have an extra full-time person that can run interns, now, yes, you're paying for one extra person, but maybe you have, 6 extra hands to run different programs.
So again, the issue, here was we got bogged down with counseling. So we have found a solution to that. And my intent and my goal here is to minimize counseling because we have a perfect way to address the counseling needs. And I do want to come back to your comment about other more generalized programming, because life isn't just about being in a crisis and needing help in a crisis. There's general well-being that needs to be addressed, and I think that's what we have found. That's what we have found as we looked at what the needs are in the community.
Yeah, before you go there, because I think I know where you're going, and that'll be a really good place to go. But I go to meetings with John more than just these. Like a few weeks ago, I listened to him talk about the budget, and a few weeks before that, I listened to him talk about the budget. He talks about the budget a lot, and the more I learn about John's job, the more I understand that adding staff is one of the hardest things to do in a town. Or he's never said that per se, but that's kind of what it sounds like, because there's so many pieces to it and everything. And tonight he sounds pretty firm that he's not interested in making it a full-time position. But what I was just thinking as everyone was talking is, that we've collaborated so well with other towns. Somebody mentioned Hudson, somebody mentioned, I know we're already working in the health department with a few other towns. Is there a way to kind of say to other towns, like, do you need a halftime person for your youth services, or someone who can do a similar sort of job? We're looking for somebody who's halftime, and maybe try and get someone who's sort of working part-time in two different places, so at least their job is, they're making more money. I don't know how that would affect their healthcare, but it seems to me the more collaboration we do with other small towns, the better it is for all of us. So that's really the point I wanted to make. And I just wanted to add on to that, John, I think you can tell, like, we are the June fan club here. We all really admire all the work she does. And we, and I'm probably the newest member of the June fan club. And I think I met with her privately just to find out what she does. And she does even more things than the things you're talking about that she does, and the things Sherry's talking about that she does, and the things Joan's talking about that she does. So the more that we can just brainstorm to help her, I think the better.
Yeah, and so I appreciate that. But if I may, Joan, just let me respond, and then I'll can answer any question that you have. I just want to be clear. I'm not here saying no. The point is here to listen and to explain my thought process and to listen to what you have to say. And and again, these are very long. We're trying to do something here in an open meeting where June and I have spent hours sitting at a table going through. And I do that with every single department on a regular basis, because every department can do more with more. But I'm always focused and looking at that sweet spot where you're going to get the maximum return. And then I do ask questions. Is there another way to provide this service? And I always stress regionalization, collaboration, grant collaboration. I mean, like I said, I'm in the middle of a study right now about regionalizing our dispatch. Doesn't mean we're definitely necessarily going to do it. But we're going through that process to see what that looks like. We regionalized our veterans. We've done a lot of regional work with the Board of Health. I mean, again, right now the poster child for this effort is the Board of Health. We have leveraged one full-time capable person into $500,000 worth of grants that we've gotten, and a lot of staff that is around those grants, and some of them are recurring for a minimum of 3 years. But we also are looking at, like, does it make sense? What other things can we do collaborative and regionally? So I want to be clear. I'm not here just to tell you no what you're asking for. I want you to understand, I understand what you're asking, and I'm listening very intently, and I'm explaining to you some of the other factors, and ultimately, it's a decision of trying to figure out, we have limited resources, and where are we going to get the most leverage for that? And again, it's not that we can't spend any money, but the most expensive place to spend it is in staff. It is the most difficult. 76% of our budget is staffing. And I had the police and fire chief several years back both come to me and say they needed 10 more people each. Would have bankrupt us. We did over a 12-month study that cost $90,000 to determine we didn't need that staffing. We needed 3 positions, So it's not saying that we can't add staff. I'm just saying that if you do, know that it's the most expensive thing that you can do, and you better be able to face the voters and the taxpayers to say that was the most cost-effective way to deliver that service. And I'm not convinced that adding a full-time position with benefits is the most cost-effective way, at least not until we explore some of these other options. And like I said, I just come back to, what will we have to have for staffing to handle the counseling for 47 people? We got that addressed for $15,000, and I'm happy. And I will guarantee you that will be in that budget no matter what happens in this community. Those are easy. The 7,000, you pick these things. And I think that's where I would be interested in this group. If you have knowledge of programs, grant programs, collaborative things that we can look at, where we can leverage some of our resources to get significant returns, that's what we have to do. A community our size, that's what I have to do, because I can't just add staff. You think Northborough is not much bigger, smaller than Westboro. Westboro has 68 more FTEs than we have. They also have a tax bill that reflects that. So we're always trying to balance everything out. And I just want to say one more thing. I have worked with June to promote and advocate for Family Services Department, because I, as a manager, do not want somebody calling me in crisis and me trying to figure out how I'm going to help them. And even though I can direct them to a service, because I can look up services, I want to be able to deal with their immediate needs and to take care of them and to make sure that they and their family are okay while we get them to more long-term solutions to their problems. But I'm still coming back, Sherry, to the other comment, because you made a great comment and I want to talk about that. But
You got
Jen?
3 people in line here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Jen, you have a
Jen.
question?
My turn?
Sure, go ahead, Jen.
Okay. I have a few points, but I'm going to try to be really brief. So I think this discussion makes me go back to one of the questions I asked when I joined, which is like, what's the mission? Like, what's our purpose? And to me, that's the important piece that I feel like has gotten muddled. And it's nobody's fault. There was a pandemic, there's growth, there's changes in the community. But I think, to me, interface is like a no-brainer. I used it before Northborough had it and other schools. I love it. I was thrilled to hear about it. To me, if we can pay more and get more from them, great. Like, let's do that. There's no question in my mind. But I think like our mission can't be to provide counseling for everybody in our town. Like, that's just not possible. There is a mental health crisis. There's a crisis of like a lack of professionals. That's a nationwide problem. Like, having what you said, John, I 100% agree with. We need to be able to we're not going to be able to create these programs. We got to be able to help people connect with the right programs. And I agree with you 100%. And I have to disagree a little bit with Kristen. Like, I don't think that I went into this meeting thinking we needed to have like another staff that was a counselor, because I know, like, as the school person, how hard that is and how involved that is. I think that we need to clarify what we really are and what we're doing. And I really think we need actually, I'm a data person, sorry, but I really want to know, what is the need in town? Have we done some analysis? What is the need? And because if we're saying the need is counseling, but that's not what the actual need is, then we're solving a problem that doesn't exist, and we're not solving a problem that does exist. So what is the bigger picture need? Maybe we need to do some kind of study or survey. What does our community really need? And then what is our this commission and June and any other positions, how do we fulfill that need? So to me, it's we have to go back to what can we do and what does the community need? And then how does the staffing make sense to fill that? Because I'm not sure that providing more counseling through the youth and family makes any sense from my experience with it. And it's a very different, and I know we talk about Southborough a lot, and I work in the school, so I deal with both. It's a different model that they have. It's a very different model. So, those were the points I wanted to make, because I just feel like we need that bigger picture. Maybe it's re-looking at sort of our mission and our plan and how we can use June's skills to solve the needs in our town.
Jen, I got to tell you, it's like you were a plant for a perfect transition, because I kept saying I'm going to come back to what one of the comments that Sherry made, and I appreciate those comments. I think what I'm trying to convey to you here, I'm not a bean counter. I'm not here to say, oh, we got no money, let me show you a lint in my pocket, and I just say no to people. I want to listen. I want to understand, and I'm always willing to invest in the limited resources if it feels right and we're going to get a significant return on it. That's what we're trying to shoot for every time we go through this process. But so the questions that you just asked, Jen, are excellent questions. Those are the exact same questions that I just asked of a group about a couple months ago. So, you know, look, we got through this pandemic, and I'm not saying that people weren't impacted, but the town of Northborough did not have the widespread needs and impact that you saw in other communities. It just wasn't there, and we looked for it. But there's always people in need, and I'm never going to downplay. Look, we're well off, but you know what? There's substance abuse, there's domestic violence, there's every bit of humanity's problems in Northborough. They're just not in your face. There aren't people walking up down the street with shopping carts that are obviously homeless. It doesn't mean there aren't people that don't need our help. Okay, but we are a community that has the resources to help people. And that's a great place to be. So I got a couple of months ago, we got together, we invited Family Youth Services, the Council on Aging, the Senior Center Director, Recreation, Mary Ellen Duggan from the school department, police, who else am I forgetting here, June? Who else was in on this? The library. And basically we brought all these departments together. And I said, listen, what are you hearing? What are the, and this is an expanded group to the COVID task force that had been meeting on a weekly basis. That was really more just your hardcore, counseling and outreach folks. And we broaden it out. And, in a former life, I worked in the Department of Residential Life for a university. And so like community wellness and the wellness wheel, right? And these were things, and I had to program and try to meet all these needs. That's how I think. I look at the big picture, okay? We got everybody in the room and we went department by department and person by person and said, what are the needs that aren't being met? It's a loaded question. What are the needs that aren't being met? And what I heard from each of those folks is that we're seeing, like the school department, Mary Ellen Duggan mentioned, we're seeing people with more mental health needs. And I said, do you have the resources to address them? And she said, yes, we're not being outstripped. Senior center, same thing. What we're seeing for needs? We have the resources to address that. And we went around and department by department, and here's a few things to keep in mind. Back before we transitioned sort of our mission and retooled the Family Youth Service Department to save it and to preserve it. Since then, the school departments had added adjustment counselors and social workers. I've added a full-time outreach coordinator to the senior center to take care of the seniors. The police department no longer calls June at 3 a.m. if they encounter a mental health issue. We have a counselor that rides with the police department. It is available to them every night of the week or every day of the week if they encounter to de-escalate mental health issues. And so what we have seen is we've added resources, but they've been diffused and they've been somewhat more targeted. Okay, so that's one point that I think is important to make, that we haven't not made investments as a community. In order for the school department to add adjustment counselors and social workers, that's a conversation between me and the superintendent and his budget. So we've had those conversations and we've added those positions because he's shown that there's a need, a direct need. So, we're not providing Family Services, providing minimal services directly to the schools. We're providing very little services to the senior center, and we're not providing this emergency response or little of that on a regular basis to the police. On a day-to-day basis, they have their resources. June, however, is floating above all of this and coordinating all of this, which is exactly what I want her to be doing for us. Okay, but let me come back to this group. So I'm sitting in the room and I'm saying, what are the needs? You are all plugged in. If Mary Ellen Duggan doesn't know what's going on in the schools, there isn't anybody on this call that does. Okay, I've got the police lieutenant. If he doesn't know what's happening 24 hours a day on police calls with people in need and mental health issues, nobody on this call knows that better than
You
me.
also had diversity and inclusion and Parks and Rec. Those are the two you forgot.
I mentioned rec, but I did forget diversity and inclusion because I'll come back to this. So diversity inclusion was part of the meeting as well, because they have a whole thing where they're talking about in terms of wellness, this feeling of belonging and community. Okay. So I'm not saying it won't be a long story, but I went around, everybody checked in. Okay. These are all the people that are on the front line of providing these services. And without a doubt, they all said, yeah, there are more needs, but they're being met with the resources that we have. And then I said, well, then what's not being met? And we had a long conversation as a group, okay? And nobody said we need more counselors or we need more, it was, what's the need? And those 3,500 phone calls, Joan, sorry you weren't one of them. I don't know why. I'm going to check into that. You should have got, you probably, do you have a landline? Do you only have a
I
cell
do.
phone?
I have
Damn it,
landline
okay.
and a cell, two
But
cells.
through all of that outreach and all of that connecting and all those conversations with the food pantry and the community meals and the interfaith clergy group and the school department, what we found was, again, we don't have a large glaring need of obvious people, in the streets with problems, right? But what we did find out in all those conversations? People are feeling isolated. People are feeling anxious. People are feeling, some of them are feeling depressed. Hell, I'll tell you, I don't know anybody on this call. I'll be the first to admit, I felt all those things in the last 2 years. The thing that keeps me up at night is making sure if something's happening and somebody isn't being helped, that keeps me up at night. If I'm thinking that we're falling down, I'm making sure that people have food and housing and mental health services so that they don't feel like, they have no options out there. That's our job. And I take that very seriously. But we went around and everybody commented that, the seniors, we called 3,500 seniors. You know what they all said? No, I'm good. I have food, I have medical, I have everything I need, but boy, am I lonely. Nice to talk. And then they keep you on the phone for 20 minutes talking to me. Like, I've got, 300 more calls I have to make on my shift, but, it's nice talking to you. And some of them we did call back just for the socialization, but there's this general feeling of, because of the pandemic, this isolation, we're not seeing family, we're not seeing friends, we're not having these great community events that we normally would be doing. So we talked about this. We kicked this around for a couple of hours. And I have to credit Lieutenant Brian Griffin. He came up with the phrase. And we have a new initiative. I rolled it out just very briefly at the last Board of Selectmen meeting. But it's a town-wide wellness program, essentially, called Be Well Northborough. Be Well Northborough. And going back to your comment, Sherry, you don't have to be distraught or in dire needs to feel disconnected or feel anxious or feel isolated. So again, we did get a little hiccup with the Omicron surge, and we had to sort of pivot again to closing down and making sure people were okay and vaccinations and all that stuff. But in the bigger picture, the concept is we're using all these departments, and through those departments and those staff liaisons, this committee, the Diversity Inclusion Committee, the Council on Aging, the Rec Commission, all of these, and then community groups, I mentioned the food pantry, the community meals, the interfaith clergy, to find out what do they want to see, what are they hearing that they want to see for community programs, for things that can connect folks. And so I go back to my days of, the wellness wheel, it could be physical activity, Sherry, is your point. Like what, could we have as a wellness program, a free movie at 1:35 for families that they can socially distance and watch a movie together. And as part of that program, June would be there, the other departments would be there with their Be Well Northborough, paraphernalia, and making sure that people know that, hey, if you do have, you are feeling anxious, or you do feel like you need help, these are the resources that are available. The idea is to market this. We actually have already signed a contract. We have engaged somebody to create a logo for this initiative. And as part of the process, we're reaching out to the community groups, including this group here. Like, you tell me, what are those programs, Sherry, that you saw that you would like to see replicated in Northborough? And it's about connecting people, and it's about, again, leveraging small amount or some ARPA funding here, and I believe, I don't want to speak for the Board of Selectmen, they have not voted on anything, but boy, did I get a lot of furious head shaking and big smiles from everybody that they think this is a great initiative. But again, connecting the community, and the idea is to have a community calendar and for this group to program on a quarterly basis things that can run. A perfect example, the senior center. They want to run a mindfulness program. I think it's $3,500 or $4,500 to bring in somebody who is trained and has a background and is certified to do this. I'm not going to get a part-time counselor that's going to be able to do this, but for $4,500, I could bring someone in and run a great program. And so we have set aside, I made up the figure. It's $100,000. $100,000 over the next 2 years to get this group going and to come up with ideas and funding. And then to see, we want it to be an organic process, and we need to talk to the community, ask them what they want to see. Parents have told us. A perfect example, the rec director said, I said, what are you hearing? And she said, parents are going crazy. They want physical activities for the kids, right? It's tricky because we still have COVID lurking in the background. We're hopeful. When we were pushing this and going down this path, it looked like, hey, we weren't even wearing masks around work at that point. Next thing you know, we got a lockdown, we got a mask mandate. You got to roll the flow, guys. So what you're doing. But it's not going to be like this. If you look at the cases are dropping off, once we can get outside, we can run programs and we can do and sponsor events that do what it is that we're hearing that everybody wants. And that is a sense of community, a sense of connectedness, physical activity, mental well-being programs. You shouldn't have to be in dire straits to participate in something. And again, I come back to that is where I think we'll see as a community the largest return on our investment. And we can get that going with some ARPA funding. And the whole time we monitor to make sure that if somebody contacts us that needs mental health services, that they get it. If they need food, that they get it. If they need help with medical devices and transportation to doctor's appointments, that they get it. I have not been told once that during any of this pandemic that we have not been able to help anybody. You saw me, I was on TV and said, if anybody needs anything, call my phone number and I'll make sure that we get someone to help you. We're there. Now things will pop up. There'll be spikes. I mean, June did a phenomenal job recently. We had two issues. We had a fire and there were people that needed help finding, immediate services and a place to live. We closed one of our hotels out on Route 9 for health reasons. And she had to get involved, as did the Board of Health, in trying to help people and connecting them with services and getting them housing and all that. There's always going to be, for me, it's nothing says, fun like 17 inches of snow in 12 hours. That usually will dominate my life for the better part of a week. Those things come and go, but we want to make sure that we're meeting, the day-to-day needs, but that sense of community. And I think, again, I'm bringing all the people that are immediately on the line that know this stuff better than I do. And I'm asking them, what do you need? And that's what they told us. That's what they told us, hands down. So I'm hoping that you folks can talk about amongst yourselves about what are the types of programs. I think the substance abuse initiative at the high school, I got 2 kids that just got out of the high school. Okay. I know what's going on. I know what's happening. Anybody work in the school department, you know what's going on too. Well, what can we do to leverage our resources to get programs and people in that specialize in that can make an impact over there? Those are the things that, in my opinion, we want to be focusing on and funding. So we have this initiative. You'll be asked your thoughts. The community will be asked their thoughts. And the idea is to, again, create a clearinghouse. And you want to mix it in with, hey, support group if one is needed for something for kids with anxiety, with whatever the need, some significant needs with just, there's nothing wrong with just getting together and sponsoring a damn hike or a movie in the park. I think we're all trying to get back that sense of community. I think that's what we all lost. And if you feel the general level of anxiety and isolation, I think it has more to do with that than, and again, there's always going to be people in need, substance abuse, we will take care of those things as well. But in terms of not pumping money, but like an initiative that addresses what we're all sort of feeling, but hard to put your finger on, that's what we're doing. And I hope you guys would support that, and I hope you would be involved in that, and I hope you would bring forward ideas for funding and programs and the things, you know, that you've maybe participated in or you saw elsewhere that we can do. That's what we're looking to move to. So
Yeah,
that was
I would love it if you guys would all share your ideas.
Yeah, so we'll be, so we are creating some potential survey mechanisms, but there'll be direct outreach to you as a committee. I mean, even think things like, you know, community affairs. You know, do they have the funding to do maybe a few more programs that would help get the community out there and feeling connected? You know, can we sponsor some events? You can sponsor, you know, a mental health day or something. You know, I mean, we just started. It's funny. I will say this. Look, I work with all the boards and committees and all the staff. The energy of this group and the excitement over this was something I haven't seen in a long time. We've all had our heads down. We've all been trying to get through COVID. We need to make sure that people are safe, that they're getting tested and all that stuff. I think people are craving that sense of community. So wellness program for the community, Be Well Northborough is the title of it. We're working on a logo. If you want to help us with a catchphrase and a marketing, and you know, again,
The high
we
school,
hope,
get the high school marketing department, John.
I've talked to Marielle and
Yeah.
Duggan about involving any groups over there, but yes,
I'll connect you with them.
that would be
I'll
great.
connect you with them. Okay.
And again, that's phenomenal, but we want to hear from everybody. And I think at least we almost need to make up for a deficit. We always had a lot of programs as a community, and that sense of community is something that, you know, before this meeting, we were talking about, I picked this place off of a map, you know, over 20 some odd years ago. Okay. I picked it off of a map and it stuck. And the sense of community is what made it stick for me. Why I wanted to stay here. Why I raised 2 kids through the school system. Why instead of buying a bigger house, I put an addition on the one I own because I didn't want to leave. Okay. That sense of community, I think, is what we all lost. And it's nobody's fault. It's just what happened with COVID. But we have a deficit that I think we need to work collectively to try to maybe give a little bit of a jump start and a little bit of a boost, and put some funding towards it to make sure that we're meeting that broader need. And again, if there is a specific population in need and that's not being met, I would like to know about it, and we'll make sure that we get resources to that. So that's my pitch, guys. I'm not here to tell you I don't have any money or we can't do anything. That's not how I operate. I want to hear, I want to listen, and I want to collaborate, because I think we can do some great things if we work well together.
Doreen, you had your hand up for about half the meeting, and I think you got tired. Did you want to say something?
I did. I just have a couple of questions, John. The first one, I want to go back to when you were talking about leveraging the positions like across the different communities, and you had mentioned the veterans agent. Could you explain, because I know that the veterans agent is shared among 4 or 5 towns. So salary and benefits wise, how exactly does that work?
Well, that's a great question. Whenever there are many different models, and I have worked with probably all of them at some point in time. That one is a formal, under Mass General Law, veterans district. Has a separate governing body that's made up of the various communities that vote the budget and technically oversee the employee. Years ago, the veterans agent was housed in Northborough, and we essentially sold our services to the other communities. I didn't like that model because it meant that all the liability was with the town of Northborough, including retirement benefits. Whereas you form a formal region, and it depends on the service. There are Mass General laws that provide for regionalization in certain services. Others, sometimes you have to get special legislation to do it. But that is a region. Kind of like the high school. We form a formal region at the high school. It's a separate legal entity. that we then fund. I've also outsourced things completely where you can provide a appropriation on an annual basis, like Shrewsbury does, to a private nonprofit to provide the services that you want to your community. You don't have really any control over it, but that's a model. Like I said, we've also done where larger communities, sometimes where they have capacity, they will sell staff time to smaller communities, you know, and I've worked out those types of arrangements where we hire somebody. And then the most recent one we did was with the Board of Health, is through a grant program sponsored by the state. We got $300,000 to add additional nursing staff. You know, there's a reason why Northborough had the highest rate of vaccination in the state at one point. You know, we led the state in vaccinations, and because we were able to get the staffing through the grant. Now that one is a little bit trickier because, again, we're back to, it's the town of Northborough with the lead health agent, who then is being paid, is overseeing the grant that's providing services to these other communities. It's a little messy. And I will tell you, it is a boatload of work on our part, because these communities have a grant. My health agent is the one that's overseeing it. And then we're hiring all these nurses. Well, guess who gets to negotiate the contracts for all that? That's me. And then we have to hire. We got an epidemiologist part-time through another grant. Well, the town of Northborough has had to hire that person. When they leave, I may be on the hook for unemployment. That's not the best model, okay? But in the interest of time and the need with COVID, I want nurses, I want people who can track, I want people who do contact tracing to make sure that we're servicing, you know, those immediate medical needs, and we are. In the long run, is this the model I would want to do? No, probably not. You know, if other towns were interested in doing a regional health department, you would do it similar to the veterans. If we ever did go to a regional dispatch, which we're looking at, it would be a separate legal entity, a separate governing body, and the town would be assessed, just like we're assessed. I don't have a choice to pay a high school or not. We have an agreement. They send me the assessment, I pay the bill. You know.
So is that?
So
is that
there's
okay?
different models.
Right. So is that, if we
But-
have a lot of difficulty in trying to find somebody to fill Ayako's position, would that be a possibility?
You could outsource it.
I
mean,
know
that's
you,
it.
I know you talked about looking at different communities, and a lot of them only have a director. I'm sure that there are some others that would really appreciate having extra help, because I'm sure they could probably use it. So there might be the desire out there to work with you to do something like that. Would that be something that would be a possibility?
Well, look, everything's a possibility. I think you need to figure out where it is you want to go. What are you trying to
Mhm.
accomplish? What's your goal here? My goal isn't counseling.
Mhm.
It's not. I have a fantastic outsource. We're finding in talking that our goal is, outside of making sure that we're taking care of those populations in need and making sure that they're okay. Beyond that, you know, there are higher level things, higher level community wellness things that we could and arguably should be
Mhm.
focusing on. And I think that's where we're pivoting to. But, you know, the other option is you can, just outsource. You can, pay somebody to do it. You can outsource the counseling.
Mhm.
Again, that's very expensive, at $200 or $300 an hour versus $15,000 for 47 people through a service that gets people where they need to go. Again, June brought me a fantastic idea that I couldn't say no to. It cost money.
Mhm.
Arguably it'll cost almost as much as the part-time counselor that we have at the end of the day, because the more people that use it, the higher the charge. My cost isn't going to be $15,000 next year. It's probably going to double, right? But I have a part-time counselor that can see, a half a dozen or so families, or I have for the same price, I got 47 people getting the exact counseling services that they need. To me, I'll take that. I'll take that every day, all day. So those are the conversations that I'm hoping that we'll be able to have as a group moving forward. Those are the conversations that we're going to have, with this Be Well Northborough. I'm excited. I think there's some real potential here. And outside of dealing with people's most basic needs of food, housing, you know, what they want is, you know, that socialization. They want a sense of community, and, you know, they want to get back to their regular lives. I can't control COVID, but within the confines of whatever's happening at COVID at the moment, we should be doing everything we can to create that sense of community, and that's what we're doing.
Mhm.
Casey, did you want to say something?
No, we got to it.
Got to it. Okay. Okay, great. Great. Joan, go ahead. You're muted, Joan.
If I could skip back to the history a little bit of what happened with, or happens with Family and Youth Services. It always had counseling. I remember when they were trying, or it was being considered to be dissolved after Phyllis was here, Phyllis and Jason were here. We went to the Finance Committee, and we also reached out to Nancy Berglund, who used to be the Assistant Director, who I believe is now on the school board. But they both were, actually more than me, very concerned about losing the counseling part of the Northborough services. And the reason being is a lot of people have private insurance, but they can't afford the copays. And also, this is a service to families, not to just children. And as everybody probably knows, family activity can affect a child's mental health. So the child who's being serviced at the high school, the middle school, the elementary schools, the family is not necessarily parents, other siblings, grandparents being serviced through counseling. So that is a reason, in my brief conversations with them, why they were insistent on having the counseling remain. Now, another thing when we did have, and I am going to go back to having another assistant director, is we didn't just provide counseling. It was Phyllis and Jason, though they did have their problems, created great programs. And the programs touched every aspect of the populace. Anybody could go at times. There were programs within the schools that they talked about depression, anxiety, bullying, but it wasn't just one child or one family. They were programs that many kids were pulled into, and it wasn't necessarily, let's talk about bullying. It wasn't necessarily the bulliers of the school, which then you have to reach into, why are they bullying? It was other people who were affected by the bullying, and even kids who didn't have anything to do with the bullying. So thus you are educating a community and also reaching a lot bigger crowd within the town of Northborough. So yes, it shouldn't just be based on counseling. First of all, it just addresses or one person counseling or family counseling. It doesn't reach to everybody that in the town that might need services. So that is why I am still in support of having a assistant director. I was, and June can attest to this, I was very disappointed that we couldn't continue programming because, you know, she just doesn't have the time. And that is what was happening when we had the assistant director. And I don't think we can get rid of, I mean, I know many towns don't have family and youth services, and many towns never did. But for the town of Northborough, it was, to me, the reason why I moved here, it was a town that took care of it, took care of everybody. And, you know, when you have somebody who can't go to counseling because they can't afford a $40 copay and they desperately need counseling, I don't mind paying taxes for having somebody in town that can help that person, thus maybe help so many different people. So that's just a little bit of the history. I remember it was largely counseling in the beginning. How many years ago? About 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And
so,
then
So a couple of things, things have evolved. Things have
I do
changed.
know that, right.
No, I'm just, things have evolved and changed. And so the thought process about how we address needs and the service delivery models have also evolved and changed. I mean, first and foremost, a lot of the counseling was for people who didn't have insurance.
Yes,
Everybody's required to have insurance now, and people have mass health. And the state has pumped a great deal of information, a great deal of resources into making sure that the mental
Yeah.
health component, particularly during COVID, has been well funded. The other thing is you talk about, well, yeah, the students have counseling, but not the families. Well,
right.
Interface doesn't discriminate. Family counseling is a component if that's what's necessary or what's sought. So that is being and would be addressed. Then the last piece that you just said about the programming, I'm in complete agreement. If the school department says, we really need to run a bullying program, and I know the schools have done a ton of work around
Yes,
this in
I know.
recent years. So I know you're just using that as an example, but if in
Yeah.
fact it was did come forward that it's a problem, and if you need a whole initiative, well, then we should be trying to put that together. And the Be Well Northborough initiative that I just talked about would potentially be one of those mechanisms for doing that. And last but not least, again, I'm always talking about getting, what's the best thing in
Yeah.
terms of getting your value. Well, if somebody's health insurance is going to pay $160 towards a counseling session, and the person has a $40 copay, well, why would the town pay $200 for counseling and not create a program to maybe help out somebody if they qualify to give them the $40 to meet the copay? Is that a more effective service delivery model? That's what we should be talking about.
And who would drive that?
Again, that's something we would talk about. We have a group in town, the Benevolent Fund, that has a process. And again, these things aren't without administrative costs because, you have to have some criteria, and it's sensitive financial information, and,
Right.
how do you do that? But it's not insurmountable. If first of all, I'll even go back one step further. Is that really an issue? So first of all, we need to find out if that's really an issue. How many people aren't using or can't get mental health assistance because they can't afford the copay? Is that?
Oh,
I'm not
and
sure
we-
how we do that, but that
we
would be the
did-
first place to start. And if it's
There
not
was
an
a-
issue, then we shouldn't be talking about it. If it is an issue, then let's talk about how we address it.
Yeah.
No matter how
there
you
was a
slice
study.
it is a much better approach than the town hiring a counselor or outsourcing and paying the 200. We need to leverage ours to get people the service they need. If they're paying for health insurance and they're paying for mental health services, why would the town pay for it
No,
entirely?
agreed.
That doesn't
agreed.
make any sense, right? So
But we
that's just an
couldn't-
example. You raised it as an example. I'm trying to walk you through my
Oh, of
thought
course.
process.
But that was raised and that was discussed. It was
Is it
discussed.
still an issue, though? I don't know that that is an issue.
I
It might have
don't
been
know
an
if it
issue
is.
before Mass Health. I don't know that
I
it is.
assume-
It might have
I
been an
assume
issue
it is.
before. I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over you. I apologize.
Oh, that's
Sometimes
all
with
right.
this,
Can I-
I'm getting a lag on my computer, which is why I keep talking over you. I'm sorry.
That's
Go
no
ahead.
problem. I assume it is an issue because I've been affected by inflation, and I'm sure that many other people have been. I'm sorry, I'm getting this battery running out thing. Other people have been affected by it too in the town, and we have programs for people who are in the lower class, and the people who are in the upper class can afford the veteran insurance, can afford the co-pays, but the middle class many times cannot. And that was how do you say it? Not a formal study done, maybe, I think with June, even 3 years back. And people said, we can't afford our co-pays. Now, did you research it and see if they were lying? No. So
But here's the thing that's changed since then is you've got universal health insurance or mass health. You also in Interface, one of the things that I ask of Interface and will continue to ask of them is when people call, they don't know what copays are. They're in crisis. They need to get connected with a counselor. I would ask Interface, those 47 people, did any of them indicate they were having trouble paying their copay? Because now it's centralized. And now we know. And if they come back to me and say, yeah, half of them can't have discontinued counseling because they can't afford the copay, well, then, geez, we ought to be getting together and having a conversation about how we take care of that. But, again, anecdotally, there's always a story of
Always.
somebody in
I know
need or a
that.
problem. We want to collect real data that is statistically valid and make informed decisions off of that. And I'm all for that. Casey, you haven't said anything.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, piggybacking on what you just said and off of what Jen said earlier, I think for the purposes of this group, again, it can be helpful if we had more data to go on, right? Because we can talk anecdotally about problems in the world and how we'd like to fix them, but what actually is impacting the group youth in this community right now, and how can we be helpful there?
I mean, the best thing to think about is if we're directing everybody that's coming to us with mental health needs for counseling, and they're going through Interface, and Interface is doing the whole screening, one of the things that they ask is, can you afford to pay? And can you afford to pay your copay? And if you can't, they set you up with a counselor that will either waive it or a program that will pay it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we're doing. So again, I know how we used to do things, but things have changed. We want to make sure that we're evolving and that we're getting the best investment return for what we have for resources.
June, go ahead.
Yes, couple thoughts. Going back to Jen's point about not being aware of the mission, one of the things I'm thinking is I should meet individually with people to talk about our history and our mission and our services. And I've done that with a lot of youth commission members, but and I think because of COVID, even though we can't meet in person, and maybe soon we'll be able to even to talk on the phone or on Zoom about it. But
June, I feel like that's not what I would want. I want like a formal mission that's like agreed upon,
Okay.
like how,
Yeah.
not,
Yeah,
and I
let
don't
me
mean any
finish,
like offense.
please.
It's just that's like what a mission of an, right, John? I mean, are you, John?
Yeah,
am I
and
on the
again,
right
look, we've
track?
got
Like-
these committees that were formed, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And and maybe we're not all in alignment, and there was a way we used to do things, and there's a way things are happening and what's going on in the world right now. And we need to constantly be relooking at that and pivoting. And not being stuck in, well, we used to provide counseling, but there's a much more cost-effective model that's taking care of that, then that's great. Let's pivot. So now we free up resources. What else can we do? And again, I'm just telling you from and talking to the people that are the staff that are in the trenches, what they're telling me is overall, the needs of the people with the vulnerable folks with the most needs are being met, that the resources are there. But the community as a whole is feeling a deficit in the sense of isolation, anxiety, and a need for community connection. But through that, we can also make sure that we're part of this is putting a really good marketing blitz for the services for the people that are in need as well, like Interface in the food pantry and community meals, and and through the senior center, programs that they have where the police department will call and check on you every day for free to make sure you're okay if you have a parent in town. Does everybody know about that? Let's promote it.
so I wanted to finish what I was saying before because I didn't finish. So having said that, because I'm very clear on what our mission is, and maybe some people, I need to spend some time talking about that. However, and what the mission is of the Youth Commission and of the department is to identify current community needs and recommend services or resources to meet those needs. Now, what I want to do to get a better sense of that is I want to do a community-wide needs assessment to find out what the needs are from the community. What I'm going to do is try to look into a grant for someone to help us with that, but I think that's going to tell us a lot.
Well, it might be something that I'm sorry, June, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's
I was gonna
okay.
say it might be something that the Be Well Northborough initiative can do. If the sense is that's what we need, like if we don't feel like we have our handle on this stuff, but yeah.
Well, can I finish, please? Thank you,
I'm
John.
sorry, go ahead.
That's all right. That's all right. Let me think.
Now I made you lose your train of thought.
Yeah, you did. Well, we're talking about the needs assessment and, one thing I wanted to say about Interface, it's fantastic. It's made a huge difference here. However, when they do get people who can afford the copay, and going along with what Joan was saying, they'll refer them back to us. They said we're on their list, and they'll refer them back to us. Not that I want to get into the business of doing the counseling, and Joan is right. It's way before my time that was being done, as well as several other great community programs. You know, an example is on a Saturday, the staff would pull together kids who have family members who died or had a serious illness. And they'd play with them, they'd bring them to different events. And I really wanted to keep doing that program, but we just couldn't. So, in terms of data, I give a lot of data out during the annual report in a youth commission meetings. So I'm wondering what other kind of data Jen mentioned, and I forgot who else mentioned, you're looking for.
Well, can I just make a comment about data? Because, you know, what we're referring to is performance measures. And so, you know, performance measures aren't, you know, it's not just about output or workload, you know, it's about efficiency and effectiveness too. You know, I don't, you know, if you answer the phone 10 times today and then you answer the phone, you know, 20 times tomorrow, it doesn't mean your workload is twice as high or you need twice as much resources. So a lot of what we report or gets reported, you know, the nature of the data, true performance measurement is about efficiency, effectiveness, and outcomes. You know, not how many people called for services. That tells me something, but it doesn't tell me if our mission was accomplished. How many of those people were successfully connected with a counselor? You know, how many people contacted you for food assistance? You know, how many were successfully connected? You know, so it's not the numbers. When it comes to performance measurements and workload, it's a whole art. My first job out of graduate school was doing performance measurements. So for a town, and you need to focus on outcomes. And most of what we track and report is workload or inputs, not outcomes.
So what would be extremely helpful to me is to get specific information about what people are looking for.
So what I was thinking was, again, just from listening, and people have had what are great ideas, but still really anecdotal, right? So for example, what you just brought up in terms of being able to run a group with kids who have lost parents or have terminally ill parents, whatever it is, that sounds great. That sounds wonderful. But how many kids in Northborough at a given time have a parent who has passed or who is going to pass, right? I would imagine it's not a large number. So like when we're thinking of these initiatives that would be nice to have in a town, is there actually a need for that, right? Where is the need? Where do we have a population of kids that are needing tailored programming like that? And or when you're talking about partnering with other districts, again, does that make more sense? Because, okay, now if we have Northborough, Southborough, Hudson, Marlborough, now we probably have a good cohort of kids who have lost parents.
That's a
I
great
do
example.
believe, yeah, I do believe back then they had enough. There was a lot of kids that were going through that. I don't know, Joan, you might know more about that, but I still am looking for specific requests for what kind of data that people
I feel
are
like we
looking
should,
for.
I'm really sorry. It's getting really late and I can't stay on that long, but I feel like those are things that we can email to you. I don't know if this is like the form to like, cause I could give you a list of like, I'd love to.
Right. That's what I meant.
So I'd love
Yep.
to, and I have some ideas and I just want to say some of the things we've talked about are like literally my job now, like at the schools. So I like a bullying program, like I'm working on those things. So I feel like a takeaway for me is maybe like me and June and Dawn need to maybe coordinate more with some of the other like folks from the admin at the schools, because, you know, if we're kind of moving away from this, you know, June and her staff doing more counseling, that does leave a possible hole that the school might need to fill too. And if there's some availability for June to do more like programming, like coming in and running a bullying group or a social skills group, those would be great things that as a school district, we can really work together. So
Yeah, my
I
take,
would love that.
yeah, I mean, my take on that frankly is I wouldn't expect June to run that. I would expect June to find somebody and we hire somebody who is specializes and has the background and runs that program to run the program if in fact it's needed.
Yeah,
know,
so
and
maybe,
so we
I
do
mean,
more
does
contract
that make
administration.
sense? That
Yeah,
could
more
we,
contract
June, are you
administration and
open to-
oversight. Yeah.
June,
Can I
could like
just
maybe
add-
you and work on those things together?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Just maybe June, you and I maybe coordinate more moving forward?
Well, we
some of
could, but again, my concern is that we really don't have enough staff to do these kind of programmings. I would love to do these programmings. Right now, the priority is hiring the part-time counselor, and then it's a time where we can sit down and look at where it's best to spend our time. But I'm just being very honest, Jen, in saying, I mean, we can meet and discuss different possibilities, but as John said, it would be something that we would have to contract out.
But again, this is like, we need to collect the need. I feel like there's a lot of need and I have a lot of data and you might have some data. So like, if we could coordinate that and decide like, what are the needs for our students? Like, you know, what does the data look like? You know, we have a huge problem. I can tell you one piece of data is attendance at school. There's a huge problem with kids not getting to school. That's a problem that affects all of us as a community. It's a very concrete problem. I could give you the data on it. So like, that's something that I feel like that's a need. We could document that. Could we, you know, pick that as a real concrete thing and, you know, brainstorm about how we can collectively work on that? You know, that to me is like, that would be an amazing outcome if this committee could, you know, come up with some plan on that. Like, those are the things that I feel like, what are the need, like, we need to do this analysis, like we talked about from the beginning. What is the mission? What are some of the issues we're seeing? What does the data show us? What are some surveys? Like, what are the issues in town? And what can we do collectively to serve that? Because again, you're going back to this part-time counselor, but who is that person counseling? Like, is that what we need to be doing? And are you hiring the right person? Because if we're hiring somebody who's an expert at counseling, maybe that's not what we need. Maybe we need a social worker who's an expert at like coordinating things or running groups or you know, we don't know what, that's where I feel like.
Well, what do we do about
I'm
the
stuck.
people? What do we do about the people who can't pay their co-payments and they're kicked back to the town? And what do we do about the 8 homeless families we have now?
So those would be great things, like concrete things for us to talk about, right?
Yeah,
Can
but
I
you
also
could-
just interject just a gap that I'm seeing when we're talking about different things? Because one of the needs that I keep hearing about in town is not a need that if you ask any organization in town, they are not going to have their thumb on this. And it is the need of parents with kids with mental health issues, or the children with parents with mental health issues needing to get seen or have a group where they can discuss what they're going through. It's the caregivers of people. This is something I've just heard about tons in the town. And this is where I see Northborough Youth and Family Services. And John, I love the Be Well idea. I have to say there was a group of us that wanted to do a mental health fair like a year ago, and then COVID started. So I absolutely love that idea. I just think we need to be very careful about where we get our information, because there are communities of people like parents caring for kids with mental health that will not be picked up by any of those organizations.
Right.
They're not the kid getting the mental health crisis. They're not in the school system. They're not a senior, and their parents desperately in need of services that I feel like Northborough Youth and Family Services, that is the key component. They're seeing the family holistically as a whole. And they're not going to miss those needs in a family. So I just want to be really careful when we collect that information. We can go to all these different organizations and departments in town, But I think unless, like you were saying, to do the town survey, and like June, you were saying you want to do an assessment of what families need. I think that is what is desperately needed, because it's the
Mhm.
people that don't have a voice in any of those places that are most in
Yes.
need of services we're not providing right now.
Yes, and Sherry, I actually got invited to the group, the special ed committee, and the parents talked about the toll it takes and the lack of support. And actually, Ally has a wonderful recreation program where she lets the kids come and play and supports the parents. So yeah, those are the kind of things I think that, and I'm sure there's other things through the schools and other organizations, but that is what I'd love to see us.
I've
Help.
tried to get trained in NAMI, and I'm trying to do that myself, just to
Mhm.
start a program for parents, because
Mhm.
these are the gaps that I'm seeing. And
Yep.
with the mental health crisis increasing and kids having, just the myriad of problems with kids waiting for beds and being in the ER and like all this
Oh,
stuff.
yes. Yep.
I feel like it is taking a toll in the community, and that's a service that's not being tackled yet. So
Absolutely.
that's just my highlight of, as we take information in,
Yep.
to be aware of places we may need to ask other questions to get the right answers.
Yes. So maybe we can I don't know if we could do a subcommittee, or if we can spend a whole meeting on talking about what you all think the best way to approach this and get to the majority of people in terms of finding these things out.
We still don't have the ability to help the people who can't pay for their co-pays or our homeless population. Low as it may be, it's still somebody who's homeless.
Oh, we do have services. June is here to help those families and connect them with services. That's what she's doing. And as far as interface, like, I'm not aware of, and we'll have to have a conversation with them about whether or not they actually have data about people who can't cover their
Right.
copay. Are they actually getting back?
Right.
That's stuff I'd want to know, and we can.
That's important.
How we address that. Yeah.
And there were two more things that since we're lucky enough to have you, John, I would like to know, how we direct questions to you and how the answers come back in an open forum. And secondly, about the opera funds. I know everyone's getting tired, but I would like to know how much we received, where did it go, and do we foresee getting any more?
Well, as I said, we have an initial pass, a presentation that was made at the Selectmen's meeting, the last meeting. I would suggest folks watch that. And
Okay.
in the process that I don't want to repeat myself, but in talking with all of the direct providers in this town about what's needed, that's how the Be Well Northborough came out. That's a discussion that will continue. And as people have ideas and suggestions, there'll be mechanisms and avenues for people to provide that input to be incorporated. So,
Did the opera requests go in yet at a certain amount to the state or the federal government?
My suggestion, and I'm not trying to punt this off, but given the hour, I've got 2 dogs at home that are probably making a mess on my floor at the moment. But the presentation that I made to the board covers everything about opera. How much money, how it came.
Happens at the end of the meeting. I was
Yeah.
just going to jump through to that. The end
Yeah.
of the meeting is sort of where all the good juicy stuff is.
Yeah. So,
It's
Okay.
a long meeting.
all right.
All right, I'll look at that. And secondly, how do you want us to direct questions if we have something comes up during our open meeting that only you could really answer?
Well, you should be working with June. Look, if I had to meet individually with 30 boards and committees, this is why
Of
you have a
course.
staff liaison. I need to work through June. Otherwise,
Yeah.
So
I'm
that-
happy to come if there's some burning issue. Like I said, I'm happy to make the rounds, and there's no substitute for being able to ask me directly what you want. I hope you all felt like you had a chance to do that tonight. And I can come back again in the future, but on a day-to-day basis, when Jen has a question, and then Casey has a question, and Sherry has a question, I'm not going to be able to respond to those. You have to work through.
Yeah.
We'll ask June, and then June will give us the answer back.
Well, I think having John here for certain questions not that I want to do this every meeting, but every so often have him come back depending on the questions and information that's needed. I don't know, it's just a,
Okay, but in the, if for not pressing info, we
Work
can go
through
through
June.
June. Yeah, okay.
June is your staff liaison. She is
Okay.
my department head. That's who you should be working with and through. Yeah,
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. Great. Unless you guys have any other burning questions, I do need to get going. I know you have other things on your agenda, or unless you're going to punt those off.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go too. I'm sorry, everybody.
I think we should, unless
yeah,
anyone,
adjourn the meeting.
I think we should, someone, first of all, thank you so much, John, for being here. I
Yes,
really
thank you.
appreciate it. I think we all
truly
do.
is, listen, it truly is my pleasure, and I appreciate your thoughts and what you have to input, and I do appreciate hearing it directly as well. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, and
Thank you.
thanks, Kristen, for
Thank you.
being here also.
Thank you guys
Yes.
for advocating.
Oh, yes, thank you,
for
Kristen.
development in our
Mm.
town.
And if someone
Thank you.
would like to make a motion to adjourn,
I will.
okay, and someone would
I
second?
second that.
Thank you, Jen. Okay, appreciate it, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good
Bye
night.
now, thank you.